Wonderful. Great. Well, thank you for hopping over to the session today. I just love the work that this organization is doing. I think it's amazing. My name is Kat Zhou, pronouns she, her, hers, Twitter handle Catherine M. Zhou. And I want to talk about how to design ethically today. And I have been told that a bunch of y'all might be designers or design students or engineers as well, product folks. So I'm hoping we get a good mix of people, and we're going to have it be a little bit hands-on this session. So it's not just a standard webinar. You're actually going to be in some breakout rooms during the course of this session, meeting different folks from wherever you all are. And so that's just a little heads up. But a little bit about me really quickly. I'm a designer at Spotify based in Stockholm, Sweden. I moved over here from Austin, Texas, like a year ago, over a year ago. So before COVID really escalated in Europe. And I've been here and I've been loving it so far. I'm also the creator of Design Ethically, which we'll talk more about. And I'm a mom to this rescue doggo that I got during COVID times. And his name is Aspen, and he's freaking great. So he's passed out right now. But yeah, that's me in a nutshell. And if you haven't checked out Design Ethically, you're welcome to do so. It's just the URL is on the bottom, designethically.com. And it's got a framework and a toolkit that I've been able to kind of pilot with various teams across the industry. And it's been a fun time. So this is the agenda for today. I'm going to just quickly go through what we're doing, background for 20 minutes. We're going to do some actual forecasting, which is going to be you in the breakout rooms. And then we're going to come back, have a little discussion, wrap up. And then if we have some time at the end, some Q&A. I'm always not that great at following the timing, so we'll be flexible with this. We're going to just kind of improvise as we go along, but this is the general structure. So background. I'm so glad you all are here. I think this is a really, really fun kind of activity for folks to kind of get involved with, especially as they're about to go into the tech scene later on. But oftentimes, whether you're a student or whether you're working at a tech company or interning or whatever, it can feel overwhelming, right? You might think that you care a lot about tech ethics and perhaps you're really curious about it. But sometimes it can feel like you're a machine in this great corporate cog, or you're a cog in this great corporate machine, actually. And so, I remember when I was in school, it'd be very frequent that I would be like, oh my gosh, like I'm just this one little person in this one classroom. And I bet with Zoom, it feels even more so that way. And you oftentimes can tell yourself, oh, the impact that I have or the influence that I have is not that great, just like the people that are directly amongst or near me. But in actuality, though, if you're working in tech or if you're working in this kind of space with all these digital products, your influence is a lot bigger than you think. And so what we've seen is just that the amount of privilege that we have as folks that work in the tech industry, work at startups, work at work on products that touch millions of people, like that is just completely amplified, right? And it's grown by the amount of tech diffusion there is, and that leads to more power. And I think one of the biggest questions that I have, for myself and for my peers and colleagues is, what are we going to be doing with that power that we have? It's a responsibility, right? And who are we going to be empowering with our privilege? And who are we going to be supporting? Which marginalized communities will we be amplifying their voices and so forth? So things to consider. And I think oftentimes it helps to reset and think about, what is it that drives the whole freaking industry that we're in, starting from the very smallest kernel, which is like the product team. So what drives a product team, and what is it that drives, a design organization or an engineering org or a data science org, or what drives the company itself, like Spotify or Google or wherever else. And beyond that, the locale that the company resides in, like SF or Austin, Texas, or New York City or Stockholm. And then beyond that, the tech industry, and finally, the racial capitalist system that we all live in. And so there's a common thread that drives all of these different areas or sectors. And fundamentally, it's growth. And I'm sure you've seen this, like growth was such a hot word a couple of years ago, we saw job titles named after growth, whether it was growth designers, growth hackers, growth VPs, all that stuff. It was very buzzy in our industry. And that is what drives what we're doing, in a scary but very sobering way. And the thing that I want to kind of have you consider is growth at what cost, though? What are we allowing or permitting to happen just for the sake of growth, right? And in our industry, what we've seen is that in order to survive as an employee, as a tech startup, as a venture capitalist fund or something, companies all have to ruthlessly design for growth, which is kind of scary. And it's something that I just want you to sit with for a little bit as you think, as you're, before you head out into your blossoming careers in the tech industry. There might be times where you're asked to do something and design something and create something and build something that is just in the name of growth. And you might have to take a stand against that if it's not aligning with your values. But more on that later. So typically, and you might have had some experience if you've already interned at a company, but a bird's eye, like very high level view of the product cycle goes like this. So in the beginning, quarterly objectives and key results, or OKRs, are chosen. OKRs is a concept that Google developed a while back, but it's used in a lot of different companies. And sometimes it can be called different things as well. But essentially, objectives and key results are like goals, small, manageable goals that have very measurable and quantifiable ways to track them. And once we've chosen them within a team, the designers and engineers, researchers, et cetera, in the team work together to achieve those OKRs. And so it's every quarter they get updated, and you can sometimes even update them within the quarter itself. But it's just a kind of a North Star way of getting closer and closer to your end result, right? And so that's basically what it is from a high level. And you can bet that the OKRs that we decide on within tech companies are driven by primary incentive of growth and by the bottom line, right? You're going to typically have OKRs that kind of gear your product towards, more subscriptions, or, less users dropping out, or, more payments and whatnot. So that's what they're normally geared for. And it'll, for example, like maybe one of Facebook's OKRs for like their messenger app would be like a 20% increase in messages exchanged across this platform. I'm making that up, but it could be something like that. So with all of those concepts there, it's quite interesting because a lot of times designers, teams across tech have developed ways to kind of gun for those OKRs, and they've done so in manipulative ways. So on the right is a screenshot from this project that Harry Brignall and Alexander Darlington put together. It's at darkpatterns.org. I like to call them manipulative UX patterns or anti-patterns. I prefer that over dark patterns just because the connotation of dark with bad is not necessarily my favorite thing. But so I call them anti-patterns. And so as you can see on the right, it's a screenshot. It's a bunch of them. They're kind of small right now, but I would highly recommend checking out the website to look at them in a deeper scope. But some of my favorite ones that stand out to me are like privacy zuckering, right? Where you're tricked into publicly sharing more information about yourself than you thought you were going to do in the beginning. And it's, of course, named after Mark Zuckerberg. Another one that I am really freaking annoyed by all the time is forced continuity, which is like when you've started a free trial with the service and then it ends and you're still paying for it like 2 months later or 3 months later because you forgot to cancel it. That's happened to me so many times. And I swear to God, I struggle to figure out how to cancel my subscriptions all the time on my iPhone. They make it like really hard to do that. So just some of those things to look out for. And as you're looking at this list, you might be saying to yourself, wow, like I've gone through some of these things and they're really freaking annoying. And they're, I don't feel good knowing that I've been like duped by these designers and these product teams somewhere out there who are trying to get me to, pay more money or spend more time on their app and stuff. And that's very natural. It's natural to feel like that's not okay. It's not fair. And I think it touches down to this quote that I love by one of my favorite authors, Bell Hooks. And she says that being oppressed means the absence of choices. And I think that's why we have such a visceral reaction to, getting tricked by these different tactics and whatnot. It's because we don't have a choice in the matter as users. And I think if you're in a product team, if you're a designer or an engineer or PM or something, and you have the ability to shape your product, you should emphasize and really value giving users that choice and giving them that autonomy and respecting them, right? Because fundamentally, we're all users at some point. So when it comes to applying like the actual ethics to the design process, I think it's helpful to kind of break apart the way that we view the product design cycle into two things. So one of them is the intent side of things, and one of them is the results side of things. And simply put, intent side, basically going over, okay, is this problem a worthy problem to solve? Not all problems are created equal. Like, so if someone came up to you and was like, yo, I want to, create a product that lets me steal money from everybody in like a 5-mile radius from me. As an engineer or as a designer, would you want to build that for them? Probably not, because it's kind of horrible. So that's an example of a product that you don't necessarily want to solve. It's pretty black and white in that situation, but there are definitely lots of other products that are way more nebulous in the gray area. And so you have to think about that, and that's part of your responsibility as a designer or someone in tech to have that in the back of your mind. And then the second part is results. So what consequences does the solution that you proposed have? And this one is the one that kind of garners more attention. And it's, I would say, results impact, right, matters more. And sometimes people will be like, oh, well, it wasn't my intent that Facebook would become a product that would disrupt like America's democracy for a little bit. But that's not really the point. The point is that it did, and they need to own up to that. And so they need to own up to those results and work on fixing that. So that's just a kind of the paradigm of the intent and results way of framing things. And we can actually map that onto the design process. So you might have seen that bottom part. It's from the Stanford D School. And if you haven't, I can just quickly go through it. But essentially, this is this design thinking process that's been used not only at Stanford, but at a variety of other schools, at other companies, at agencies, by freelancers, you name it. Generally, it's something along these lines, like every company has their own version of this, maybe. I've seen a bunch, but they're all kind of the same thing. And this is typically how it goes. It's tried and true. And it starts out with empathizing. So you empathize with your users and you get to know them and you understand what they're going through. And then you define their problems that you want to solve, right? And after you've defined those problems and you've chosen the right ones that you want to tackle, you ideate on some solutions and then you prototype them and you test them, etc. And so as you can see, empathize, define kind of aligns with intent, and then the rest align with the results side of things. But this method, as widely used as it is, I think there's a bit of room there to kind of think about ethical consequences and to really, really dive into that consideration. And so naturally, I added some more steps, so more work for everybody. But I added 3 steps, and one of them is evaluate, and it goes under the intent side of things. So after you've defined your problems, evaluating, asking yourself, is this problem statement that we've defined ethically worthy of being addressed? And it might be yes, it might be no. That's your call, and it's really up to you to kind of do the research and check in with other communities if this is something that needs to be addressed as a problem. And then another step is forecasting, and that happens after you've ideated some solutions. So forecasting is simply asking yourself, can any ethical violations happen or occur if we implement this idea? And what are they? So this is what we're going to be doing later on during this session. It's the juicier part of it. It's a bit more hands-on. And it sounds hard, but it's not as hard as you might think it is. And then after that, you've prototype tested and shipped, then monitoring. So are there any new ethical issues occurring and how do we design around them? Sometimes if you are in tech, it's really easy to ship out a product or feature and you're like, okay, on to the next cool thing. I know I go through that, phase a lot. But it's important to check in and monitor on the stuff that you have already shipped to kind of make sure that it's not getting derailed or things aren't changing up. We've seen with some products that have gone haywire in the past, like these companies like knew about it for a while and they didn't do anything about it. They were just preoccupied with other things. And then of course, bots became more and more and more, and the harassment became more and more and more. And so it's important that we kind of get a pulse on what's going on after we've put out a product. So about forecasting, I'm going to just quickly go over some like basics, and we're going to go into the instructions, and then we're going to go into breakout rooms and actually do some of this stuff. So forecasting for me kind of came about after I saw so many headlines about how there were so many unintended and unforeseen consequences in tech. And it bothered me because I thought it was kind of a cop out. Maybe something could have been unintended, but unforeseen, I'm not sure about that. I think if you say something's unforeseen, that means you didn't really do your homework and you didn't really research properly and you were kind of reckless in the beginning. But that's my hot take there. And so I think to begin forecasting, there's a couple ways you can view a product, right? And one of the ways that I like to kind of break down products that we know is by their layers of effect. So every product has 3 layers of effect. And so the first one is your primary one, it's the intended one, it's the known one. So for an example, like Yelp, I'm sure you all have used Yelp or maybe know of it. If I ask somebody, like a layperson on the streets, what is Yelp? They'll probably tell me the primary effect. They'll be like, okay, Yelp is this platform where I can read reviews and write reviews. Fair. And that's exactly what Yelp wants you to think. That's what they talk about when they market their product and stuff. It's very much known. Secondary effect, also intended, also very much known. Maybe not as commonly talked about as the first one, but it's definitely there. It's part of their business strategy. And for Yelp, that would be, they're an ad revenue generator for like companies. So you can put your ads there, you can make money off of ads and whatnot. And it's still very much part of their everyday like hustle bustle. And then the last part is the tertiary one, which is unintended, potentially known, but it's definitely not what they wanted to go for. And so an example that comes to mind is I used to live in DC, and I would walk past this pizzeria place a lot. And this pizza place actually got famous because I think it was around the time of the 2016 election. There was a lot of like fake news spreading around internet circles and stuff. And someone who was absolutely delusional believed that this place was like a democratic, like child trafficking site or something. It was absurd. And this person went over to this pizza place with a gun with the intention of shooting it up. Luckily, nobody got hurt, but it did make national news. And surprisingly, this Comet Ping Pong Yelp page blew up with reviews that day. And they had nothing to do with the pizza, nothing to do with the environment of the pizzeria. It was all political. And that was an unintended tertiary effect that occurred with Yelp. And so they actually had to put out this like little active cleanup alert that you see in the screenshot, just basically saying, yo, we saw this is going on. This is not what's supposed to be happening. So this is what we're going to be doing. AKA they would be monitoring the reviews and taking stuff down that's just political. So that's an example of what can happen. That can happen to any kind of company, any product. So for us as designers, we really have to first define and design ethical primary and secondary effects, but also try our best to forecast tertiary ones and ensure that they pose no significant harm. And that's where you get into the more, intense stuff. So forecasting, it sounds hard, but honestly, you all have this in your toolkits. If you've taken any kind of classes in these areas, or if you even just have like your own intuition and your own introspection, I think that's really important. Like, I think from all the workshops that I've done with people, a lot of times people come out learning a lot about themselves and how they would act with certain things. So just keep that in mind. It's not as hard as it seems. So we're going to choose a product, and I had you all write your favorite products in the Google Slides, just because I wanted to get some inspiration. And so I saw a lot of good options. Does anybody have any strong favorites from that Google Slides little share out? I'm gonna also stop sharing my screen for a second so I can see it myself. Let's see. Okay. Yeah, we've got some good ones. TikTok, Notion, Slack, Arena. Interesting. How about, what if we did TikTok? I think that's a really fascinating one. I also have not I've not used TikTok myself. And so I'm very curious about it from your perspective. So let's do that one. I think that'll be an interesting topic. So I'm gonna go back and share my screen just so we can go over the instructions. But so we've done TikTok. So we're going to do an exercise called dichotomy mapping really quickly. And this is going to be in breakout rooms, which will get you situated in that soon. But we're going to have you go into this slide. And on slide, I think it's 7 or 8, I believe, you'll see this little like post-it note kind of situation. If you just want to, when you're in your breakout rooms, copy that particular slide number and make a duplicate of that slide, not the whole deck, just that particular slide page. You and your team can work in that page and write the stuff on the stickies. And so with dichotomy mapping, it's big, long $5 word for a pretty simple thing. And so first you're going to just list all the beneficial aspects of TikTok, and think about it from a macro perspective. So how does it affect a family or a neighborhood or a group of people, right? So in this example, I have Airbnb, right? Airbnb stimulates the local economy, bringing in tourists. And then think about it from a micro perspective as well. So how can it help one individual? And Airbnb might provide cheap, comfortable lodging for a wary traveler. And then on the flip side, thinking about the harmful aspects, again, in a macro context. So for Airbnb, it might play a role in gentrifying a neighborhood. And then on a micro perspective, it might cause some dangers to hosts and guests if the platform is abused in any way. So thinking about it in that way, there might be some things that you think about that are kind of nebulous and float between good and bad. And so you can put them in the middle. I also encourage you to think about communities that maybe don't look like you or act like you or live like you. It's important that we think about it from a very holistic perspective and inclusive perspective as well. So I'll give us some time to do that. If you have any questions, please, chat me in the Slack chat, I guess, and then we can regroup for discussion in like 10 minutes. Welcome back. All right. Thanks all for participating in this. I'm gonna share my screen so I can see, so you all can see what I'm seeing. Okay, here we go. Can you all see this? Perfect. Okay, so I'm gonna just click through some of these, and then if this is your particular page, feel free to just call out like some of your juiciest faves of what you came up with under the harmful or beneficial categories. And you can either do so with your mic on, or if you're more comfortable chatting it in the group, you can do that as well. But so the first slide, I guess it's Ren, Yusuf, Evelyn, and Arda. I'm hoping I'm saying your names all correctly. But feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah, any interesting things that stood out to you? Anyone from this group?
From the app, I use it every day, and I just realized I used it, the app, for 30 hours this week alone. So I thought it was really addictive and definitely waste time.
30 hours. It's wild that Apple tells you now, or whatever the phones tell you nowadays, how much you're spending on certain apps. But good point.
I've never used TikTok. Sorry. I'm from this group as well. I've never used TikTok, but I have noticed that a lot of weird trends like migrate from TikTok to YouTube.
Mm.
So, for example, the sea shanty trend.
What's
So,
that?
um, like work songs that people sing at sea. Um,
Oh,
yeah. So what we wrote was enables non-mainstream songs to trend.
oh, okay. Wow, I'm so out of it. Over here in Stockholm, I'm like, what is this sea shanty song? Okay. Interesting. I also think it's fascinating that you put vector for harmful behavior. Um, yeah, I've heard that there's like, there can be a lot of different like trends that come out of TikTok, and maybe not all of it is necessarily helpful or nurturing or community fostering. But cool, thank you for sharing that. That's really fascinating. I'm going to hop over to the next group. So hopefully y'all can see this one with Chen Chen, Stephanie, Mandy, and Miyuki. Anything that you all want to spotlight from this group?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that TikTok went from being like a kind of cringy app to being very mainstream. I know
Yeah.
they like rebranded from like Musically to TikTok, and when they rebranded, everyone was like, "Why did you even bother? Like the content's all the same." But clearly, it's evolved to be like a much more like a large presence in society. So like our group talked about how it has a lot of like stakes in pop culture, especially among younger generations. Artists will try to target their songs to different TikTok artists because if it can go viral on TikTok, it can like go viral elsewhere. And yeah, obviously concerns are like it's addictive. It's designed to be addictive, which has there's certain qualms about that. And then also like like concerns about privacy and information, as with any app. I know like there was a push to get TikTok banned from the United States, although that didn't come to fruition.
Fascinating. The addictive part and the information collecting part is definitely piquing my interest. But yeah, thank you for sharing. So this group over here with Che, Sun, Ella, and Jeffrey, if y'all want to shout out some of your favorites.
Yeah, so we talked about how TikTok is really good in that it gives you really personalized content, that like the For You page. So you get content that you enjoy, and like personally I find it to be very relaxing. But then on the like on the bad side of that, because it gives you such personalized content, it's kind of like you only see things that you would agree with, and it kind of just feeds into your confirmation bias, which can be really harmful later on down the line.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting. And the point about like the addiction that someone else has brought up as well, like I guess I don't use the app, but how is it that they kind of have you addicted in the design? What aspects about that stick out to you?
Um, I feel like I find it very addictive because the videos themselves are really short, so it's short enough to fit my very short attention span. And because it's like scrolling, you just need to like scroll to see the next video. It makes it very easy for you to just endlessly scroll and
Mm,
end up wasting a lot of hours on the app.
yeah, someone's saying the autoplay in the chat. Good point. Okay, cool. Thank you. Let's go to this room with Renzo, Zaria, Amanda, and Singer.
So I guess to say something original, because we have mostly what's been said already. But for the harmful part, for the drama, Zaria was talking about this, where if there is like some high engagement video or like TikTok that is going around, or if there's like if there are a lot of TikToks focused around a drama-filled topic or community or whatever, then even if you try to like get away from it, it still often pops up because of the high engagement of those posts. They often get a lot of likes, shares, comments, and that kind of tells the algorithm, hey, this post or TikTok is getting a lot of like engagement, when in actuality it can be in fact very problematic. And then I guess another harmful thing is due to the accessibility of TikTok. There are a lot of, I don't know, haven't read of any news of it, but just from using the app, there is an issue with like minors being exposed to like inappropriate content, or like people trying to like exploit minors on the app. So yeah.
Oh, wow, interesting. That's kind of scary. Yeah, I don't know if this was like a long time ago, but I remember reading some of the early reports about TikTok and about how people were confused on how things became trending or became like so viral, because it wasn't necessarily transparent maybe in the beginning of why one video had a bajillion views and stuff. And so I guess that maybe plays a role into the drama as well. Cool, thank you. Okay, next group, Erica, Chabin, Tessa, and Tiffany.
Yeah, like a lot of other groups, we had similar points, but something that people haven't really brought up as much is the impetus that it's put onto the tech companies, or in this case, TikTok, to filter or manage the popularity of their app. And specifically, I'm talking about this case that was a year ago in Brazil, where there is a teen who live streamed his own suicide on TikTok.
Oh,
And
wow.
instead of reporting it to authorities in Brazil, TikTok first called their PR team and tried to downplay what was happening and to keep it from spreading on their application or in the news. And then multiple hours later, then they called the police. You can see in the article that I linked here as well. So thinking about that and the harmful effects too of who we decide to have our information and what they will choose to do with it.
Mhm. Yeah, thank you for sharing that article. Cool. Thank you. And on to this next group. I don't know who's in this one, but here we go. I see that you said Donald Trump got canceled, which is a good sign, I guess.
Yeah, so I was in this group along with Angela and Sarah and Liana. And I guess like we were just talking a little bit like very similarly, just like how the way that their algorithm works is not very like transparent. And I guess it's interesting because users like it a lot because, you know, it automatically recommends things for you. But I mean, like this is like really good for the company, and like even like of course like the user seems to like it, but it might not be in their best interest. So like they don't really have any like time controls like other apps. Yeah, so that's kind of hard.
Interesting. Thank you for sharing. And the one that you have about possible isolation of low income groups, that's also sticks out to me. And is that just by the way that it segments its users and what they see?
I was kind of thinking more of that, like if there isn't like if low income groups like don't have access to like smartphones or the right technology, they won't be able to consume the TikToks or whatever. And so because TikTok is such like a culture, like people talk about TikToks all the time and Vines, and you like almost talk in like meme speak with friends. It's like if there's a low income group that isn't exposed to that, then it could be possibly isolating.
That's a really good point. Really good point. Thank you for sharing. Okay, and last but not least, Alina and Soyeon.
Hi, okay, so I think that most of what we have is pretty repetitive. Additionally, Soyeon and I both haven't used TikTok ourselves, but mainly the benefits would be connection, entertainment, bringing information or new perspective to things, and perhaps even some videos that could act as mental health support. But harmful effects could include like harassment, predatory behavior on underage people, a decline in productivity, privacy concerns, and a comparison trap.
Okay, love it. Thank you for sharing. Powerful team of two over here. So I want to give a quick shout out to you all for doing this. I appreciate that you got your hands a little bit dirty and played around with these this dichotomy mapping exercise. I'm also going to come back and share my screen for a quick little wrap up of the rest of the stuff. So hopefully y'all can see this part. Okay, so you all presented so many wonderful concepts and really thought-provoking. And for me, I want to take a deeper dive into TikTok now that I'm so curious about it. But one thing I want to say is that just because you've forecasted a bunch of stuff does not mean that you should never build something, especially if you forecasted bad stuff, right? And of course, there's certain products that you should never build, like you just should not build. But some products, you know, you've got a mix of good and bad things that come out of it. And I want to just kind of reiterate, like, if you forecast something negative, it's simply a design problem to solve, like later on, or you know, now. And so if you reframe them as design problems, additional design problems, you can kind of tackle them without feeling like you can never build anything new. And I want to just share this picture too, which you may or may not recognize. This was in, I think, 2018. This is in San Francisco, and it's at the Google employee walkouts that had happened back then. At the time, there was a lot of like news about some sexual harassment cases coming out of Google, and the people that were, you know, the perpetrators of the sexual harassment were these like really high up guys that basically walked out not really getting any kind of punishment except for some generous severance packages and getting their wrists slapped a little bit. So it was pretty disheartening, and people were obviously mad, and they spoke out and they walked out. And this was not just an SF thing, it was all over Google campuses everywhere in the world. And I just want to say that, you know, we have unprecedented power today in numbers, in the way that we organize, in the way that we communicate with, you know, the products that we've got. So when you're working in tech, when you're a student in tech, to kind of take that power that you have, recognize it and use it for good. And so one of the things that I like to think about is how we can scale and mature this design ethics movement. And I call it a movement because I don't think it should be any kind of one, you know, chief ethics officer in their ivory tower talking about this stuff or tweeting about this stuff. I think it really is like a grassroots movement, boots on the ground, like people in product teams building these things. It's up to them to kind of make that change. So as an industry, I think there's a couple things we can do, ensuring that our schools and programs teach ethics. I know my alma mater is starting this kind of program, which I think is really exciting. And I'm hoping that the schools that you all go to kind of have some of these intersections between engineering, design, data science, and ethics and whatnot. Also overhauling our metrics that we use to gauge our performances. And so rather than having it just based off of growth of the bottom line, can we measure things like, you know, user happiness and user health, and focus more on those holistic things that are better for us as a society and that are more compassionate and caring. And also creating new pipelines for diverse and inclusive teams. When I say create a new pipeline, I mean like break the freaking old pipeline that we've got right now, because it's not working. Right now, our tech scene, especially in the US, is so predominantly like white and East Asian, and we're building products that are for people all over the world. And in Sweden, where I am right now, it's even more like niche, more homogenous, I mean. And so I think there are so many opportunities for us to break the existing pipelines that we have and to make new ones that bring more folks to the table. As a company, what we can do is to upskill our workforce and, you know, have folks learn about ethics and learn about these different areas of thought, especially when they're in product teams. Also, having regular ethical audits with third-party companies or review boards to keep us accountable, which is definitely easier said than done, but it's something that, you know, if companies can work with government to kind of figure something out, I think that would be a good direction. And granting amnesty to workers that speak out. For me, I always think it's so shameful when a company, you know, retaliates against someone who's spoken out by like firing them or by blacklisting them or whatever. I think if someone speaks out about something in a company, that means they care a lot about that company, that they are willing to put their job on the line by saying, hey, I'm not okay with this company doing this thing. So I think amnesty is important in that regard. And then finally, as individuals, there's a lot of things we can do as well. Learning about, you know, the world, learning about these topics, and learning about people that are from all over the world, different corners. And also unlearning the biases that we do have, because when you grow up in society, whether you like it or not, you've learned something, some kind of bias along the way. So how can we let go of that? And that's an everyday journey. defining your own values so you can figure out what are you okay with doing within your career as a student or as an engineer or designer. And once you have those values concretely defined, being okay with saying no. And I'm hoping that, none of you all will ever have to experience what it's like to get asked to do something you don't want to do in your careers. But the chances are it's going to happen some point down the line. So I hope that when it does happen, that you're ready and you have that backbone to stand your ground and say, I'm not okay with making this. It goes against what I believe, and then pushing back. And fundamentally, I just want to leave you with this, which is that nobody is neutral and doing nothing is not neutral. So even if you sometimes feel like, oh, I'm just an intern here, I've got no stake in this, or what's my voice going to, have an impact on anything? How is it going to change anything? The fact of the matter is any little thing, any little effort helps. And by not doing anything, you're being complicit if something terrible is going on. So with that, I just want to say thank you for participating in this. And I know we've got 3 minutes left. So if you have any questions, feel free to let me know either in the chat or just, by unmuting. You can also always reach out to me, whether it's on LinkedIn or Twitter or whatever, and I'm sure they'll send out some of that contact info as well. But yeah, thanks for coming and joining in on the session.
Hi, Kat. I have a quick question.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you've been able to apply ethical design, like think about it, voice your thoughts on ethical design at Spotify in your work.
Yeah, great question. So I joined Spotify about a year ago, and previously I was at IBM where I'd actually been applying some of this stuff with product teams over there. At Spotify, we have actually an ethics guild that started up before I joined, which is amazing. And so I've been with part of that guild, and we've been kind of exploring some of these things. It's a bit smaller of a company, so the guild itself is a little bit smaller too, and the efforts are a bit more, I guess, micro level. But what's been reassuring is that there are people that care about this within Spotify. And so whenever you go off to your companies, wherever you're working, I would check out for employee resource groups or guilds or clubs or whatever within your companies, and you might find like an ethics guild. And that's what we've got at Spotify. So yeah. Oh, I see someone. Let's see if there's any chat things. Okay. Do you wish Spotify had more community-based features like social media apps? Or do you like the current features? Okay, good question. That's something that we've been talking about for a while, and it's definitely on the table for, especially nowadays when there's not as many like in-person concerts and everything's more like online anyway. So we are definitely thinking about community aspects, like whether it's group listening or whatnot. And with the current features of friends and followers in place, I currently don't really, so I have an employee account that I switched over to after I joined Spotify. So it kind of erased all my friends and stuff on Spotify. So I don't use that particular feature myself. But I did like it when I had it. Yeah, thanks for that question.
I think Evelyn had her hand raised at one point. I don't know if you saw that.
Okay, yes. Evelyn messaged, I've worked on some software engineering teams. Seems like designers and PMs have all the power over product decisions. What can engineers do when they see opportunities for improvement? Good question. And so it's funny because I've also heard this question from like designers and from like PMs that have said the exact same thing, but they're in your role. So I think everyone always has a little bit of a like chip on their shoulder. But what I encourage people that feel that way is just to try to find spaces to speak up. And if if it's hard to do that in product meetings or whatever, to find allies within your team, whether it's another engineer or another designer or someone else that can back you up and be like, hey, I've got this idea. Can you help like amplify it if I bring it up? And it's a bit of like a soft kind of skills thing to negotiate, but keep on doing it and keep on being persistent. And I'm giving you all the power there. Okay, have you ever been in a situation where you were asked to design something you didn't agree with? Yeah, so after I graduated from university, I was working at IBM, and the first division that I was at IBM with was their public service division, and I was working in the frickin' Pentagon. I was working with the Air Force. I was designing for the Air Force, and I quickly realized, I was like, I don't necessarily agree with what the Air Force is doing. And that's just my own personal kind of like stance, and I did not feel comfortable. And there were times when like I would be asked to do something and I was like, I just felt not great about it. And I'm going to be honest, in the beginning, when you're like fresh out of college, I was feeling very vulnerable and confused. And looking back, I think I wish I would have spoken up more. I actually ended up leaving that division within like 8 months or 9 months, switched over to IBM cybersecurity over in Austin, Texas. But I have been in that situation and it's not fun. It's very stressful. So I encourage you to either speak up or get out if you are put in that place. Good question though.
Does anybody have any last questions at all? And thank you again, Kat, for coming to talk with us. We do really appreciate it. And thank you to everybody who came. I'm really glad that we got to do this and also get to interact from some people from different chapters of Hack for Impact, because that's always fun to meet people from some other schools. Just a reminder to come to the next Bytes of Good Live event. Maybe little hint might be on cybersecurity, social cybersecurity, if you're interested, which is super weird coincidence because Kat used to do something like that at IBM. So stay tuned for that. But thank you so much for joining us, and thank you so much, Kat, for presenting today.
Thank you for having me. Have a good day.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.